2 balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. It's his way back. Walk the wall. Chris Taylor.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. My name is Jeff Spiegel. This is Scott Geirman. We are coming at you live from Arizona. We are at spring training. Blake Williams behind the computer helping produce tonight, which we appreciate as well. But obviously some breaking news in the last 24 hours from the Dodgers, and not the positive kind. So we're here to talk about Gavin Lux. We're here to talk about the injury. Obviously got lots of updates with all of that. But let me start here. To all those joining us live on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, we appreciate you. Thank you. Scott, it's good to be in Arizona. How are you enjoying spring training? I mean, we'll get to some bad news here in a moment. We can start on a positive note. Are we feeling all right about things, enjoying Arizona?
Yeah, we're feeling pretty good. It's good to be back here. I was here a few years ago, back in 2020. Got to see Mookie Betts' debut right away in spring training. It's just good to be back. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Well, the breaking news, as we said, Gavin Lux out for the season. The official diagnosis is a torn ACL and a sprained LCL. He injured it yesterday, rounding second base, going to third. He tried to avoid a throw, sort of caught a cleat from what we have heard, and immediately went down, said he heard something pop. We knew that it wasn't going to be good news. Today it was confirmed. Dave Roberts this morning, when he spoke to the media, confirmed that Gavin Lux did tear that. And that he's out for the season. Gavin Lux then spoke with the media about an hour later. Super emotional. You could just see in his face, he wore it, that, you know, his dream is to be the Dodgers shortstop. That dream was so close to being realized, and now he will miss the whole year. We got to talk to Freddie Freeman. If you didn't see those videos, they're all available on the Dodger Blue YouTube page. But Scott, let's just talk about what's sitting right in front of us. Gavin Lux was the starting shortstop for a team that let Corey Seager go 12, 18 months ago. They let Trey Turner go this offseason. They passed on Xander Bogaerts. They passed on Carlos Correa. Yep. They passed on all of the guys available. And now Miguel Rojas in line to be the starting shortstop. What does that mean for this team?
You know, they're thin. Their depth was already a little bit thin. You know, they passed on, or they, made a decision not to really unload the bank and really back up the truck for one of those top free agent shortstops, whether it be they couldn't land the deal or players just decided to sign elsewhere. But they were already up against the salary cap. They were already up against the luxury tax threshold, but they blew by it already.
Yeah.
So it ultimately doesn't matter. So it's kind of a lose-lose situation. It's unfortunate, but this is where they're at. And this is really after they acquired Miguel Rojas and they immediately signed him and announced that extension.
Yeah.
This is the spot they find themselves in. And it kind of lines up that Miguel Rojas looks like he's the guy.
Yeah. It's one of those moves that I felt not awesome about at the time. I didn't understand it. Now, obviously, knowing what we know now, I'm grateful they made that move to some degree.
Yep.
But let me back up just one more step, because we're going to get into Rojas in a moment. We're going to get into the dominoes that fall lineup-wise defensively. I saw this on Twitter, and I actually thought it was a compelling point. The Dodgers offseason, if they made one big bet, of all the bets they made, the biggest bet they made this offseason was on Gavin Lux.
Yeah.
By passing on every shortstop, by basically building a team around the assumption that Gavin Lux would be able to handle shortstop defensively, that he would be able to hit well enough, that he would justify that spot. I mean, they hedged their bet a little bit with the Miguel Rojas signing, although Rojas was expected to cover for Miguel Vargas, Max Muncy, among others. But Gavin Lux was the biggest bet they made. And this doesn't mean they were wrong for making it. This is a fluke play.
Yep. But
it does throw a massive wrench into this season. And I think raises some question marks about how far this team might be able to go as currently constructed. Do you agree with that?
In some ways, I believe, again, the Dodgers build themselves on Andrew Freeman's been big since in his tenure in Dodger Blue. Build them on the peripherals, all about creating depth so that you're able to absorb blows like this.
Yeah.
But a lot of what Gavin Lux did this offseason is his extra work has been really publicized. It's been noted. He's put in those things. He's been at Dodger Stadium a ton this offseason, working on the things that really were his big deficiencies. Right. So I think that this injury, as far as their depth it's upsetting.
Yeah.
But I feel for Gavin Lux, and this setback for him is really just gut wrenching for a year that it for all intents and purposes was going to be kind of hopefully his breakout performance to live up to that hype that made him, that real top prospect. So for me, and I think everyone around the Dodgers, as far as being a fan too, it sucks to see Gavin Lux go down with this because we don't know how long it'll be and what long-term damage will happen with his knee.
Yeah, and there are so many dominoes within the organization, but I think the point you make, I mean, Freddie Freeman seemed fairly emotional when he was talking about this in the clubhouse today, just saying how hard Gavin Lux had worked, how impressed Andrew Friedman and the coaches had been with the work that he had put in, the way that he had grown defensively. And so for all of this to happen to him, I think is brutal. And then if you're the Dodgers, you kind of were running a trial period to see if Gavin Lux was your shortstop of the future. And unfortunately, from a roster building perspective, we still don't know that answer. We're 12 months away from having an answer to that question about, is Gavin Lux the shortstop of the future? And so now, 12 months from now, we're going to be sitting here going into the 2024 season, presumably still not knowing if the Dodgers have the shortstop of the future on their roster. Rojas will still be around, so they won't necessarily, they'll have a backup plan still in place, and we'll know by the end of 2023 whether that's a good backup plan or a bad backup plan, and we're going to talk Rojas here in a second. But that's one of those, there's lots of these little tentacles of things that spread out from it, but that's one of them, is just this idea of, the Dodgers were hoping to find out quickly whether they had the shortstop of the future or whether they needed to go out and trade for somebody. They still don't know. It doesn't mean they won't trade for it, but this might have been Gavin Lux's only chance to prove that, because the Dodgers might say we can't wait another 12 months.
Sure. Yeah, they definitely. Great points. Yeah. Just like it all points back to, they passed on a lot of, you don't force a mega deal. You just don't do that. That's what'll get you in salary cap hell, and that'll get you in a position where you're with a player that doesn't necessarily fit their plan. And maybe all those big guys, the big names didn't necessarily fit their plan. I'd hate to say this, I'd shout out to Blake, but not signing Corey Seager is looking like more of an upsetting thing, every single year. So this is just another instance with that. But we'll wait to get to Miguel Rojas.
Yeah, let me pick up on the Seager piece. Yeah. Because to that point, obviously, if you're the Dodgers, you couldn't possibly have known that we would get here, that Gavin Lux, you would trust him. And it's one thing if Gavin Lux played out and failed, couldn't handle it defensively, couldn't hit. Then you could look at Andrew Friedman and say, that was a terrible bet and it didn't work out. Mm-hmm. This is the one scenario where you can't really blame anybody.
No.
Now, in hindsight, of course, do I wish they would have signed Seager or one of the 4 or 5 shortstops this year? Yes, because the Dodgers would be better now. They were going over the luxury tax anyway once the Bauer decision came down. But those are some really, really, really rough contracts. Obviously, for 2023, I wish we had one of those guys. But as weird as it sounds, I still don't know if I would have preferred to have Bogarts for $300 million or Seager for, $35 million a year through his age 40 season or whatever. But it sounds like you would go back and say, of all the deals that have been given out, I would feel good about the Seager deal in hindsight.
Sure. Yeah. I think Seager's the most talented offensively of those. His fundamentals with hitting, that's who he is. His hit tool is off the charts, and it will stay like that. I think long-term it projects. A lot of us at Dodger Blue agree that his hit tools will age better than most of the shortstops, if not of anybody.
Yeah.
But, that's old news. I'd really like to focus on, what options they have.
Yeah.
And Gavin Lux, the last thing I'd like to say on Gavin Lux is that he had stretches last year where he became a Dodger. He became a piece in that lineup at that bottom half that prominent veterans, Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, they spoke about how much he meant to that bottom half of the lineup, turning that over, being a problem for opposing pitchers, and really being, that next guy. He wasn't just a bat in the lineup. He was becoming a problem. And that walk-off that he had after making that error, it felt like he had moments where stuff was beginning to click.
Yeah.
So it's just, I can't just say how upsetting it is that he had this.
Yeah, absolutely. Matty Man makes the point. Look, this injury could have happened to anybody. They could have signed Seager and he could have gotten it. Yep. If anything, Seager, some of these guys would have been more likely to get injured based on their injury history. But it is what it is. The good news, expected recovery, before next season. He will miss this entire season, but he is expected to be back eventually. So let's move on to what there is. Miguel Rojas immediately slots in. Again, we're down here at spring training. I was in the clubhouse this morning. As soon as Miguel Rojas walked into the room, he was the most popular guy in there, because while we hadn't yet heard from Dave Roberts, there was kind of a sense that the news wasn't going to be good. There were some rumblings that it was very bad. So Rojas immediately the most popular guy in the clubhouse when it comes to the media, because everyone wanted to talk to the guy who is now the starting shortstop for the Los Angeles Dodgers. How much faith do you have in Miguel Rojas to be able to perform at a level that doesn't derail what the Dodgers are hoping to accomplish?
I think that the expectations for Miguel Rojas need to be tempered a tiny bit. We've seen exactly what he could do in his career, who he is, what he can be. He's a safe bet.
Yeah.
That's what the Dodgers do. We've seen a couple of those guys, and they're at the kind of the twilight of their career. Jimmy Rollins, they've had, Chase Utley. They brought these veterans in that they can do what they do. They'll have moments, but we've seen exactly a lot of what they are.
Yeah.
Miguel Rojas last year was a big outlier. He dealt with, a few injuries that really hampered his hit tool. But the one thing that has always stayed every single year since he moved to Miami has been his glove.
Yeah.
And he's been a beacon he's missed out on a few gold gloves. He's been named within finalists for quite a few years. Yeah. And I think that what the Dodgers will, and, fans will take note of is how solid of a glove he really has, and the steadiness he's going to bring there.
Yeah. And look, Trey Turner, Corey Seager, the guys that have manned that position over the past handful of years, average at best defensively. I mean, if you want to say slightly above average, sure. But keep in mind, defensively, with the shift going away, there is going to be more pressure, I think, uniquely on second baseman and shortstop to be able to cover more ground. And so in some ways, upgrading defensively at shortstop is going to be important and maybe has oversized value to this team. Now, you kind of mentioned it. I think Rojas brings two things to the table that are positives. The first is defense, and the second is sort of a at-bat quality, yes. I'll say. He doesn't strike out. You look at his StatCast page going back to 2018 when they started measuring this. He has never been below the 90th percentile for strikeout rate. His whiff rate last year, 92nd percentile. Strikeout rate was 95th percentile. So he doesn't strike out a ton. He doesn't miss when he swings a ton. Okay, those are the positives. Now let's get to the negatives. The offensive profile. Dave Roberts thinks there's something untapped. That's what he said. That clean up a wrist injury. Sure. I look at this and I see exit velocity has been below 10 in 3 of the last 5 years, below 10th percentile, bottom 10th percentile in the whole league 3 out of the last 5 years. The 2 years he was above, he was in the 18th and the 25th percentile. I look at hard hit rate. The highest he has been in the last 5 years is the 18th percentile. He doesn't walk a ton, 12th percentile walk rate last year. And so, not beating out infield singles, the speed is in the bottom half of the league. And so you're looking at a guy last season who, when you do the math on the OPS, we're talking about a 600 OPS last year. It was about 700 the year before. 2020 in just 40 games was his best year. That was like almost a 900 OPS for 1 year. He's basically a 700 OPS player for his career, roughly. So that's a below average offensive player. Again, you look at weighted runs created plus. He has one above average offensive season in his career. That was 2020. Last year, 73rd percentile. So, 73rd percentile. We're talking about Cody Bellinger, Max Muncy, Chris Taylor level offensive production from last season. So it's going to be a steep decline offensively as long as we accept that is coming with A, this isn't option A, and B, he's going to play great defense for you.
Yeah. I circle back to understand his ceiling. It's okay for Miguel Rojas to not have that, superstar potential. But Gavin Lux, that's where this will, you can see the step up, step down. For what Gavin Lux lacks, Miguel Rojas will bring with the glove. It's just that extra step, that potential that's left untapped that we haven't seen yet with Gavin Lux. If it is in there, I believe it is in there. The organization believes it in there. That's why they banked on him giving that shot at shortstop. Yeah. Miguel Rojas, we've seen who he is, but that glove will play. What you'd like to see with those numbers, strikeout percentage, walk percentage, you'd like to see that within, if it's 6% strikeout, you'd like to see it just like it is, or a 6% walk rate. You like to see about, 12 to 13% strikeout rate. And he's right there. So you're going to get a bat that's not going to strike out. He's going to make solid, it's not solid contact. He's
solid contact. He's going
to make contact where he's not going to miss. They're not going to miss a lot of bats when he's in there. And that's fine. And that'll be valuable in the lineup. You need those guys that are going to do the dirty work. Yeah. And I think Miguel Rojas, being who he is, will do that dirty work. He'll go up there and give you a great at-bat quality. And for me, And they just signed into that extension. So I do like having those veteran players on the roster, and I think he'll excel in that role. And he's universally liked around the clubhouse already, and fans he's already stepped right in, just like he's never left.
Yeah.
So I like that comfortability. I think he'll be great for who he is. I think it'll be just fine.
Yeah. I think the thing with this Dodgers group that I think people are starting to panic is maybe a strong word, although I have heard some people that are panicking. Is the offense for the Dodgers. They look at this lineup and they say, all right, the top four, Mookie, Freddie, Will Smith, Max Muncy, JD Martinez, those five, I'll say I feel really good about. I think the first three, everybody feels great about. I think Max Muncy is a pretty safe bet to have some form of a bounce back season. Whatever you think about JD Martinez, he's going to be an above average hitter. So those five, I think Gavin Lux was kind of the number 6 guy offensively for this group. I think he was going to be better than Peralta. I think he's going to be better than Thompson. I think he's going to be better than Vargas. So what happens now is you're looking at a group where 6, 7, 8, and 9 in the lineup are kind of question marks, and you just traded your 6 guy for now a new number 9 guy, which I think puts more pressure on the new 6, the new 7, and the new 8 to hit. So I think that's the concern. I can get by with Rojas is going to be better defensively. Defense, harder for us to quantify statistically. Yes. And so it's a little bit tougher pill to swallow to say, oh, well, the defense will be better, because that's not going to show up necessarily every time in the same way that an RBI or a home run does. And yet, how do you feel about the offense that the Dodgers have? We're going to get to the last question here. It's going to be a little bit shorter show, but the last question we're going to get to is kind of who does this crack the door open for? But I think the thing is, I've processed this throughout today. My biggest question has been, do the Dodgers have enough offense in this lineup to keep up? I feel good about pitching, starters, relievers personally. I feel good about the top 4 or 5 in the lineup. 6 through 9 starting to worry me a little bit.
I think, offense headlined by Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Will Smith, Max Muncy started to figure it out. And I think him, and if we see Chris Taylor is a big wild card. Yeah, he has to be. He needs one they desperately need that turnaround for him. They need to get him back to injury form. He dealt with the neck. He dealt with a few other things. And I think Chris Taylor, just like we spoke about last year, down the stretch, the Chris Taylor not being who he was from 2017, 2018, 2019 has continued to be a problem for the Dodgers, and how versatile he is around the diamond. I think Max Muncy will figure it out. Yeah. You have to remember that Will Smith's a top 3 catcher in all of baseball. Yeah. So I do believe they have enough offense. Yeah. It's just going to be those guys, those Trace Thompsons, James Outman possibly around the team. David Peralta is who he is. Yeah. He's a guy, he's a platoon man. JD Martinez, of having a full-time DH, someone who really will buy in, and he values that position, I think, more than almost anyone in baseball, which is great. Justin Turner was in that role for a bit, and he even spoke about he didn't feel comfortable in that designated hitter role. I think JD Martinez will be fantastic. He needs to find a little fountain of youth, find a little 2018 magic in there. Hopefully something works out with Mookie and they, kind of get rolling, build off each other. But once they start to gel, I think that lineup with those names and the history that they have, I think they'll be okay. But just like you said, it's going to be those guys in that 7 to 9 that will need to prove themselves a bit. Yeah, I think like one thing I've said about this team kind of throughout the offseason is the Dodgers are putting a bunch of guys into different buckets and saying, we just need 2 of you to figure it out, And so now on the offensive side, where it was Chris Taylor and Trace Thompson and now Peralta and James Outman and Jason Hayward, it was, hey, can kind of 1.5 of you guys figure it out offensively and we'll be fine. Peralta feels like he's been above average offensively basically every year of his career. Yeah. So with Trace and Outman and Hayward and all the rest of those guys, Chris Taylor even, you're like, okay, we just need 1 of the 4 of you to be okay. Sure. Now that number's 2, because Chris Taylor's going to need to carry a little bit bigger load. We're going to talk about that. He's going to play more in the infield. Dave Roberts mentioned Mookie Betts could be playing some more second base. We don't really understand that. Maybe he's the backup for when Vargas needs a day off. They slide Mookie in and add another outfielder. But where you needed 1 out of 4 to hit, now you kind of need 2 out of 4 of those to hit. If I gave you those 4 names, Chris Taylor, Trace Thompson, James Outman, and Jason Hayward, those are the 4. And you could throw in, I guess I'll put Michael Busch in that category too. Are there 2 guys in that group that, do you feel good? And you don't have to give me names right now, but do you feel any degree of confidence saying 2 of those 5 will give you
average to above average offensive output this year? Outman, Hayward, Taylor, Thompson, and Bush.
Oh man, Taylor and
so you do you feel some degree of confidence that Chris Taylor can be an average to above average offensive player this year?
It can't get any worse than it's been.
I mean, people said that about Cody Bellinger for a long time.
It can't get any worse than it's been.
Okay.
That's just for me.
And I mean, but it's been bad. I mean, like, it's not just like, oh, it can't get worse. It's like with Chris Taylor, you look at the weighted runs created plus. I mean, he was 93 last year, so that's actually better than I was expecting it to be. He was above average offensively for the 5 seasons prior. Our producer, Blake, wants us to say Yanni Hernandez. We're not going to say Yanni Hernandez. But so he did have 5 above average offensive seasons prior to last year. So
he's been great.
Okay. So Trace Thompson was great last year. Are you buying into his ability to make any level, any sort of percentage of that sustainable?
To be a reverse splits guy in MLB, and especially with what the Dodgers do, is really difficult, and that's difficult to game plan with. Once the Dodgers really bought into that, there were certain points where the numbers were striking that he was hitting nothing but right-handed pitching.
Yeah.
But they would put him in or keep him in against lefties, and you're like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So I think they've kind of fixed that. If that's the platoon they're going with, David Peralta and Trace Thompson, if he continues those reverse splits, is a match made in heaven.
Yeah.
If those trends do continue, but I'll bank on Chris Taylor a bit. I really will.
Yeah.
I believe he'll give you, if you're asking above average per above
like a 100 weighted runs created plus.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Taylor can hit definitely at one, maybe right there, tick above, maybe about 105. He just needs to stop striking out. He was missing bats. It was bad.
Yeah, real bad.
I'd like to believe James Outman can be a guy.
Now we're talking, Scott. Now we're talking my guy here.
If they do give him that opportunity, he didn't have much. He only had just a little bit for that little game stretch, and he never came back up.
Yeah.
So I think that if the door opens up, just like you spoke about, Mookie Betts could get an opportunity to sometimes come on the infield, and that will open up an opportunity for James Outman to get in center field.
Yeah, I
don't really buy into Jason Hayward just yet. I'm not going to buy a batting practice homer off of Tony Gonsolin and say they fixed him. That's just I can't do that yet. I won't be that guy. Overreactions won't work like that for me.
Yeah,
I need to see it. His defense, sure, but I think James Outman. I want guys with upside, and that's where this youth movement is going to come into play.
Yeah.
And I think, I'll say James Outman and Chris Taylor.
Okay.
Those two.
And I should have clarified, that's also assuming Miguel Vargas hits. Sure. Like, he's kind of like, you need 2 of those 5 if Miguel Vargas and Max Muncy are both performing to the levels. And again, I'm not saying Miguel Vargas needs to be an all-star. The reason I'm saying league average is because we're talking about the sort of 6, 7, and 8 hitters in a lineup that has 5 really good guys at the top. So if Vargas is, a 110 weighted runs created plus guy, and Chris Taylor's a 105 weighted runs created plus guy, then all of a sudden Miguel Rojas at 85 weighted runs created plus, you don't necessarily feel quite as much. So that's kind of my thinking there. So let's get to this last question, and then if we have time, we'll get to some thoughts and questions from folks in the chat. Again, we appreciate those joining us live on YouTube. We appreciate those listening to us after the fact as part of our podcast, Blue Wire Podcast Network. We're available on Spotify, Google, Apple, wherever you get your podcast. Search for Dodger Heads. Please rate, review. That would do us a huge solid. So please do that. But the question is, aside from Rojas, who needs to step up? Now, normally you would think this would be like an infield specific question. But again, Dave Roberts sort of gave the hint that Mookie Betts could see some more time at second base, which means it could be an outfielder. And so is there a guy that maybe sees a pretty significant uptick in playing time from your perspective, or an uptick in opportunity maybe, or maybe a guy who wasn't going to be on the opening day roster and now may be on the opening day roster because of this? Because it's the first domino is Miguel Rojas, but then that domino, if Rojas is every day, then ... So who kind of jumps to mind to you as you look at this roster? Again, and it could be a guy that, now I think this person's on the roster, or now this person was going to be a reserve, but now they're a starter. Who you think of first?
Could be Yanni Hernandez. It really could be Yanni Hernandez. I don't know how much he'll get, but if you want just a wild card that's on the roster, it really could be Yanni Hernandez. They brought him over in December from the A's. That could be one. I think David Peralta might get more opportunities. He was getting some looks today against lefties. So they might really try to, bounce him back a little bit. Chris Taylor will definitely get more opportunities versus both sides. I don't think they're, so hell-bent on platoons anymore.
Yeah.
I think they'd like to see.
They don't have the depth to be hell-bent on platoons.
They don't have the depth to do that. So I think Chris Taylor, probably a little bit more. James Outman, I think that's right there. I think James Outman, there was a kind of a Max Muncy. Max Muncy needs to have a big role.
Yeah.
He needs to be the Max Muncy he's been, but he did show that.
Yeah.
Max Muncy showed a ton of qualities that he had during his peak year, 2018, 2019. But if you want one guy, that's just a wild card. Yanni Hernandez, I think.
Yeah.
He could make the roster. And I think he's there. Yeah.
I'm skeptical on Yanni Hernandez.
We have to be.
If you think Miguel Rojas' StatCast page is dark blue,
yes.
Let me introduce you to Yanni Hernandez.
I know.
He has 2 option years left and was DFA'd by the Oakland A's. I think that should tell you everything you need to know about Yanni Hernandez. I think Scott did that just to get our friend Blake over here to smile.
Tiny bit.
Yeah, tiny bit. I actually had a conversation with Juan Toribio of MLB.com that's going to be posted tomorrow, so be on the lookout for that. Small tease. And this was one of the questions I asked him. And he said Outman. And Outman was my choice because in my mind, Outman was going to make the roster. But the more I talked to people who were in the know, Jason Hayward, by all accounts, is pretty much a lock for the opening day roster, which means James Outman, in most people's minds, was pretty much a lock to be in the minor leagues. Now, if Mookie Betts is going to kind of move into the infield and Chris Taylor is going to be your backup infielder as well, then you probably need an extra outfielder, and that might be James Outman. Do they keep him as a 4th or 5th outfielder rather than let him get consistent at bats at AAA, to be determined? So Outman's one, but the more I thought about it, another name that I find interesting is Michael Busch. He's just a guy that shows up on top 100 prospect lists from some people and then never gets talked about when we talk about the Dodgers. Obviously, a huge part of that is nobody really knows if he can play defense or where he can play defense. They're trying. They're convinced he's going to be a second baseman. He's played a little bit of left field. As you look at this roster, there's still probably not a great fit for him because Miguel Vargas is going to be your second baseman and because you have David Peralta in left field. Now, Peralta could probably play a little bit of right field and you could try Busch out in left field. He gives you the bat. He swings from the left-hand side. Those are things that Gavin Lux did because that's the other piece. Lux was one of your only left-handed hitters as well. So I wonder if there's a pathway to Michael Busch. Now, he and Outman have not looked good in very small sample sizes so far this spring. Those are guys that like you'd love to see start tearing the cover off the ball to be like pound the door down and make it so they can't close it on you. But I think of Outman and I think of Michael Busch and I guess Jason Hayward probably in the same category of guys that the leash is going to be longer. Now, Bradley Zimmer, Steven Duggar, like is there a wild card like that you think could sneak on? Because maybe they feel better about Zimmer or Duggar being the 5th outfielder and letting Outman play every day in AAA. I don't know.
I think James Outman's the one that kind of sticks out there. Just same thing I talked about Gavin Lux to Miguel Rojas. One's got, upside untapped potential. And James Outman is some guy we haven't seen what he can do. He came up, defense was really his claim to fame all the way through the Dodgers system. And he's outperformed his bat there. Yeah. So I'd like to really see what James Outman has. I think he's one that can stick given an opportunity. I don't like to pull the ripcord on these players so fast. I'd like to give them, and that's the unfortunate circumstance and the point to why having guys stay in AAA so they can keep that rhythm so that when they have a larger landing strip. That's why this year for Miguel Vargas is so important because they're going to give him, he's arguably their top bat, their top hitting tool guy. Yeah. And that's why now they're buying into him and saying, here's your spot, go ahead. Yeah. Instead of James Outman that he unfortunately doesn't have that direct path where he can, go out and play in MLB and get, that MLB pitching down and make those mistakes and figure it out. So it's unfortunate that he has to kind of hit the ground running if he wants to stick, because if he starts, people got those expectations from his game in Colorado. Yeah. But they need to remember that his glove was what really brought him through the system. Yeah. But there's that untapped potential talk. Yeah. Where I'd like to see that happen. But we'll see if Jason Hayward can do something. But we have to remember he was DFA'd. Yeah. He was gone by the Cubs. So he's here on a prayer. So we'll see if they can find something with him. But yeah. I'm going to roll with Outman and to appease Blake Williams. We're going to get Yanni. Okay. Let's get to some questions. Yeah. Let's get to some comments from the chat before we go. And I'll start with this one from Roger. Yanni Hernandez, career 198 hitter. If he makes the roster straight out, we're in big trouble. Yeah. That's getting a thumb down from Blake and a big thumbs up from me. Anna asks this, is Luke Williams worth talking about? Now, Luke Williams is interesting because when I was in the press box today, Luke Williams is a name that I heard mentioned. And you look at sort of his career. Luke Williams, a guy that was not super familiar with.
played with Miami and I believe San Francisco last season, played with Philadelphia back in 2021, but has played everywhere. He's listed on MLB.com as an outfielder, but he's played 160 innings at third base, 180 innings at left field, 135 innings at second base, 18 innings as a shortstop, 73 innings as a center fielder, some first base, some right field. It's a guy who plays all over the place. Feels like Zach McKinstry-esque, Kike Hernandez-esque. We know the Dodgers like these guys that play everywhere. And after all, we're talking about an infielder who got hurt. So I'm not expecting you to be an expert on Luke Williams' career because I was not. I mean, the offensive numbers are not awesome. They're not necessarily what you would like. 615 OPS for his career, 602 last season. That was in, 127 at bats. So, but I mean, this could be a guy that if he has a decent spring could find his way onto the roster, right?
He might be one of the darlings of spring. We don't know, but he's kind of a 4A ball player for me.
Yeah.
He's kind of outperforms at AAA, but when he gets called up, doesn't perform, which is really accounts for why he's bounced around a tiny bit. I'm not going to buy too much into Luke Williams, but he could be worth talking about, but we're still very early in camp. We haven't seen anything yet. Those guys really haven't blossomed yet. So allow them to get into the mix. And then those maybe some of those non-roster invites can kind of make a name, have some numbers that pop, and we'll see some that don't make it, some that get snubbed and some that get released.
Yeah.
There are some that in recent years have really performed and you wonder why they don't make the roster. It's just because they don't have the spot.
Yeah.
And organizations are sometimes kind to these players, and instead of, keeping them or dealing them, they release them to let them go sign somewhere for a better opportunity.
Yeah.
And there will be those guys this year. There always are.
Yeah. Okay. A42 says, let the kids play. You and I agree with.
Yep.
I will say this. There is a downside to let the kids play that you typically don't realize when you say those words outside of your mouth, which is letting the kids play does not always – the guy who's the top prospect all the way through AAA doesn't always figure it out in the major league level. And even if he does, it doesn't typically happen right away. Miguel Vargas, James Outman, these are guys that they don't have 80-game sample sizes at the major league level where they've struggled, and then we're like, well, now maybe they'll figure it out. These are guys that haven't really played. They have such small sample sizes. And so let the kids play sounds fun. It typically does not come with great success, the type of success that Dodger fans are accustomed to. And so while that will be enjoyable, while I still think this team will be good, I do think there's a downside. So let me end with this question, Scott. I'm going to get rid of our who needs to step up the most. How much does this change overall season expectations for the Dodgers in your mind? Because now, let me actually pause. Let me pause that real quick because there's one more thing we need to talk about.
Okay.
Is there a trade out there? Willie Adames has been mentioned. The Brewers said they're not trading. Tim Anderson has been rumored. I think just because he's good and the White Sox aren't good, but the White Sox have pretty much said that they won't be trading. There's a handful of guys still on the free agent market. Like the last thing that we need to talk about before we end this is there a guy outside of the organization that you think is a difference maker? Jurickson Profar, another name I heard a ton in the press box. He wouldn't be the answer at shortstop, but he might be an answer offensively to contribute and help a little bit there. Do you see the team making a trade? Do you think they wait until the trade deadline? Do you think they make a free agency signing, or do you think they just say we're going to stay put?
So there's a few tiered answer there.
Yeah.
I'll try to go through as best I can. Trade wise, another name you could toss in there is Ahmed Rosario. That's another one that you could throw in that hat, but the Dodgers are at a point of need. And that's the part where Andrew Friedman does not like to get himself in. He doesn't like to be in that spot when it comes to the trade market. Get yourself in a position where teams know that you do need this, and that's when the price gets driven up. And one thing we know about Andrew Friedman is he doesn't like to overpay. So mid-year, sure, but the roster might be in a completely different spot at that point. Somebody might have solidified a spot. Will they supplement? Absolutely. The trade deadline will come, and they will go for someone. Whether it's a bat or an arm. And I think they probably do both. They generally do mix and match a little bit, try to, get better on the peripherals always.
Yeah.
As far as the free agent market, Jurickson Profar is an interesting name, whether it's in the infield, but it might just give them another, versatile spot.
Bat.
Exactly. Something out there can be done. Whether maybe we don't know. That's an interesting name. I
Yeah.
don't know how much he would gel right away.
Yeah,
We'll
people in the
have to
chat are
see.
not happy about
I'm
the
not.
Jurickson Profar suggestion.
For me, I'm not too keen on that one.
Well, hold on.
Ugh.
Mr. Carlos Correa has a line. There is a line somewhere that there are players that you're not interested
Never
in,
gonna
and
let
Carlos
this go.
Correa is
I
on
can
one side of
explain
it,
it again.
and Profar's on the other side
I'll
of it.
explain it again. That's nothing. I personally have nothing against Jurickson Profar. I just know how much of a pest he was. He's like Angel Pagan for me was with the Giants so long ago. Never forget that. Ingrained in my memory. Carlos Correa is a talented shortstop. Dodgers had a need at shortstop. He's a great hitting shortstop. Whatever you think about him, that's just what it is, and that'll never die down.
No,
I guess.
well,
It's here.
We all have terrible takes. That's your take,
I guess.
So there you go. Someone asked, Ahmed Rosario was the worst defensive shortstop in baseball, if I recall, according to outs above average, second percentile. So there you go. We've got all sorts of suggestions in here. Somebody asked, why is Profar gross? You could just Google Profar and the Dodgers, and I'm sure you'd find plenty of answers to that question. Somebody points out, explain to Kershaw that Profar is coming, and yes,
couldn't do it.
That's part of the problem.
Yep.
So we'll see. I personally think they stay put. I think the Dodgers don't panic. I think they wait this one out, and then they see maybe Adames is available at the trade deadline, maybe Anderson is available, and then you make a move then. I don't think they're going to do anything until they get a sense of what do we have in Vargas, what do we have in Outman, what do we have in Hayward, what do we have in Taylor, what do we have in Rojas. And if you get enough positive answers to those questions, then you ride it out. And if you get negative ones, so many teams make the playoffs in Major League Baseball nowadays that you're probably going to be fine. So let's close with the question of what's kind of the ceiling of this team from now on. As you look forward, I was trying to find somebody asked the question and I was going to throw it up here. But anyways, what do you see as does this change your overall perspective? Do the Dodgers go from they're going to win the division to now they're not going to win the division? Are they finishing second all along with or without Lux? Where are you at and where are you at now?
I think, the Dodgers are still, I believe, as a few days ago, they were still the betting favorites to win the division.
Correct.
But I'll take the brunt of this. Dodger fans need to understand that the San Diego Padres are a very talented team offensively. They might lack in the pitching, especially with the Musgrove news. But they are a very deep team. They have what it takes, but they have the same issues that the Dodgers have in 7, 8, 9.
Yeah.
At the bottom end, but at the top end cannot be argued. They have, Soto, Bogarts, Fernando Tatis. It's I'm forgetting people in there, but it's about time Dodger fans started to realize that Dodgers, they might run the division again.
Yeah.
But the San Diego Padres, they're doing their best to, they're doing their damnedest to come.
Yeah. I mean, when we got here, I looked it up on DraftKings and I said, okay, who has the highest overall win total in all of Major League Baseball? Mm-hmm. And it's the Dodgers and the Astros that are tied. But at 94.5, I believe it was. If you want to go over on the Dodgers, you have to pay minus 125. If you want to go over on the Astros, you only have to pay minus 110. All that is to say in fancy way, that's a fancy way of saying Vegas has the highest win total number on the Dodgers of any team in Major League Baseball. This was post-Lux injury. We didn't know the extent, but I'm guessing Vegas baked into that number, Lux being gone. So I'll say that. I think the Padres are very good. I think the division was going to be competitive. I think that the division is not going to be a blowout one way or the other. I think somebody wins the division by 5 games or less. Mm-hmm. Is it the Padres? Is it the Dodgers? I don't know. I will say this probably knocks off 3 to 4 wins for me, for the Dodgers. I think Lux to Rojas is a pretty significant downgrade. I don't think it's they have no chance of winning the division or the World Series anymore. Because I think if Rojas is that bad, I think they make a change and you might end the season with a better option at shortstop than you had to begin the season. So that's my view. Our friend not Daniel Starkin says 90 wins for the Dodgers. BC says Padres will win the division. Anna says she doesn't understand betting odds, so I apologize for that. BC says bad season ahead. So there's options there. And to the people commenting on betting odds, those are not necessarily solely a reflection of who they think is the best. They're trying to make money so I would just say that number is high enough to where even if you don't think they're the best team, at least Vegas is telling you they're in that top tier. Mm-hmm. They're in the upper echelon post all of this. So let's leave it there. It's obviously not a positive day of news for the Dodgers. We will find out more in the coming days about Rojas, about their plans at shortstop. Is Chris Taylor going to play more shortstop? Is Mookie Betts really going to play more infield? Could Miguel Vargas take some reps at shortstop? Is there somebody else in the organization who has a breakout spring training that makes them change their plans? All of these things lay before us. We appreciate you all for joining us again. Those live on Facebook or on YouTube, thank you. Those listening to the podcast after the fact, thank you. We greatly appreciate it. Please subscribe, ring the notification bell here. Dodger Blue 1958 on YouTube. We are at spring training. We will be here all week through Friday. We have clubhouse access every single day. And so all of the access that we get, we record and we post on our YouTube channel. We had the interview with Freddie Freeman, with Gavin Lux, with Dave Roberts, twice actually today with Chris Taylor, talking about whether his arm is healthy enough to play shortstop, with Miguel Rojas, with Julio Urias. Tons of incredible content. Noah Syndergaard made his first start. So all that is there. We will have all of that for you throughout the week. So please subscribe, ring the notification bell. Check out DodgerBlue.com, where folks like Scott, Blake, who's helping us out again, their work is up there constantly giving you the latest news and notes about the Dodgers. And please follow us on social media at DodgerBlue1958. We appreciate you all for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your night. And of course, as always, go Dodgers.